Like all the men in the Meade family, Uncle John's hands were farmer rough and big as shovels. He would have made a fist and held a pint of dirt without losing a grain if there had been that much left after the last dust storm. Uncle John had a vision. He was John the Baptist, warning the farmers, "You will perish if you rob the land, put nothing back." Some heard his voice and repented with hot, tearless eyes, but it was too late for Oklahoma.
Lots of folks back east, they say, is leaving home every day, beating the hot old dusty way to the California line. Across the desert sands they roll, getting out of that old dust bowl. They think they're going to a sugar bowl, but here's what they find. Now the police at the port of entry say, "You're number 14,000 for today." Oh, if you ain't got the do-re-mi, folks, you ain't got the do-re-mi, why, you better go back to beautiful Texas, Oklahoma.
When wounded and needing a balm, I pull out the bottom drawer of my mind, marked Oklahoma, which holds a list of small, raw towns with names of touching beauty. I recite with reverence Bowlegs, Depew, Pretty Water, Idabel, Lone Star, Gypsy Corner. I was 17 years old. We were in the Great Depression. Sharecropping wasn't the greatest way to make a living, and people couldn't get anything for their crops. My father had a large young family, and he knew he had to make some sort of move.
The Great Depression of the 1930s brought hard times throughout America, but nowhere was harder hit than the Plain States. Commercial farming and a decade of drought led to devastating dust storms that obliterated the once fertile land. Farms were foreclosed. The tenant farm system collapsed. Whole communities boarded up. Desperate for work, folks hit the road by the thousands. Most, like the McDaniel family, headed for California, the promised land.
Someone asked me what drove so many people from the Southwest and Midwest, and I said, well, it was the threat of acute starvation. He said, acute starvation. This was a man from Beverly Hills, and evidently he'd never been faced with the prospect of acute starvation. But it was necessity. It was a hard time. I don't think a lot of people realize the harshness, the bitterness of the time. And if they do, they put it out of their minds.
I'm a Dust Bowl refugee. I'm a Dust Bowl refugee.
The Dust Bowl migrants found few jobs and rock-bottom wages. They were unwelcome strangers in the Promised Land. Okie became a fighting word.
Okie means, in most people's minds, poor, ignorant type people. It's not a complimentary term, but I revel in it because I am one of these people.
Listen here, friends, I want to tell you about a brand new dance that you gotta learn to do. It's called the Okie Boogie. It's called the Okie Boogie. Do it Okie style. Oklahoma style. That mean an Okie Boogie, it'll nearly drive you wild. Let's hear that.
When we see the people who have survived, they have homes, they have healthy, happy grandchildren who never knew any of their hardships, I think there's a certain nobility to them.
Ain't you want a patchy foot? Hey. Oklahoma style.
I think we do have to start at the beginning. My beginning was being nursed and nourished and entertained by a mother who essentially was an artist. She didn't have watercolors, she didn't have paints. She could simply take a pencil or a pen and draw these things. Here is my pride and joy. This is like a Matisse to me. There is a ruffled curtain at a kitchen window. Her very best dishes, there aren't many, are on a shelf. There are some plants in the window. I love that picture. It tells me so much about the few poor treasures that farm women could have. One day she entertained all the widows in her church. Essie Davis, Mattie Ellis, Goldie Tyra, Willa Mae Cranford, Mary Bell McCoy, Anna McDaniel. This isn't just a list of women. Each one had a history. Each one was a colorful person.
Like Phoebe in the New Testament, they were helpmates in the gospel, walking miracles. How did they breathe with their corsets laced in the very last eyelet? Those godly women who coiled their hair in great cinnamon buns and stabbed it to their heads with tortoise-shell hairpins shaped like men. How often they tried to set my bare feet on their holy road to realms of bliss above, slow-gated as I was, and ever stumbling, looking backward over their shoulders at beauteous perdition.
I always lived with my mother, so her loss was tremendous to me. It was as if the great presence of God had gone out of the world, with her going. And I see her very, very substantial gifts now. We just think, oh, Mom, Mother and Dad, your parents. You don't see them as having special gifts. I think we've all inherited what we are from our parents, and I have this affliction from my mother.
Wilma really had to suffer criticism and very little encouragement, although her mother was an artist and very talented, and it seems like everyone in her family were very talented. But writing is a little different thing, from art. Creating art, I think, is always respected. Oh, that's a pretty thing, it's an object. But writing is not something you can touch. Some relatives, not close enough by love to really matter, would command the awkward girl with eyes that didn't match. Pick up your bare feet. Don't drag them across the splintered floor. Pick up your flour sack dress and hang it on the rusty nail. Until a woman called from outside the broken window, pick up your name and write.
I never really talked too much about my writing, really. It was a private thing. I didn't really care to share it. But at a certain point, even though I knew our editor had a policy of not publishing poetry, as most papers do, I took a shoebox of my unpublished poems, and with great fear and trembling, literally, I went to Tom Henyon's office. He gingerly raised up a poem and read it, and he raised up a couple more, and the expression on his face changed some way. He published something almost every week. I have to give him credit for encouraging me at a time when there was very little encouragement for poets, most particularly spinster poets. You know, I was expected to write poems that rhyme June with moon and heartrending verses of unrequited love. I don't think he was expecting what he got.
Jelly Matthews never used to appreciate the beautiful tree, wasn't grateful for bird songs and train whistles. Now he praises the Lord for a lot of strange favors since he got saved from deafness of the spirit. Yesterday he bounded up on his mother's porch and set the wind chimes clanging. "Praise the Lord for Johnny Cash," he exclaimed to her. "Man in black, he knows the gospel, beats it out on his guitar better than a preacher could." He came to the fair last night. I saw 5,000 people stomping, yelling wild. Mama, when he sang Folsom Prison Blues in the spirit, a revival broke out. You know, Johnny Cash, like Wilma Elizabeth, was also Native American. Johnny Cash was also part Cherokee, like Wilma. Yeah, well, that's a lot of people who are mixed blood, who don't normally identify themselves. Heritage is in how you evoke what is of value. Concerns of family, community, land, those references speak about her heritage.
Everyone should have a lover, and I had 2 of them, now locked in memory. At 9, it was the lazy Cimarron, with orange water and huge catfish the color of mud. At 17, I found another in far-off California, a tumbling crystal river with the holy name Merced.
Not only is she traveling in space, but she's traveling in time. I think she's going back for more than 50 years to when she was 17 years old. And I think she's remembering all those things, all those experiences, the picnicking along the Merced. And I think maybe the smells are bringing it back. I bet she smells her youth here.
How beautiful, they're out of control.
Oh, look at it right there. See the little tiny little warbler?
Tiny warbler.
Teeny tiny. Yeah, sometimes if you make the noise and you put a stick out, it'll come. I'm not going for it. There is something gentle in the landscape. A valley with marshes, something like this, is soft. It's not the craggy coast and it's not dramatic peaks. It's something that I think maybe even predisposes you to take a look at the commonplace more than a dramatic landscape would. The real treasures are all around you, and I think that's one thing that Wilma has really shown people. The people who are sitting in the booth next to yours in the restaurant that are discussing the Bible or their husbands or their children who may not be turning out the way they want to. And that's where the real work is, and I think that's where the real treasure is too, in listening to that and valuing its importance.
I'm writing a book on Pixley. Oh, there is so much poetry in Pixley. The sad bars and the sidling dogs and the people. Oh my, yes. Pixley is just replete with inspiration.
After we finished We Live or Die in Pixley, and there's a number of things that she herself is working on. She's gung-ho about just about everything she wants to do and present. And I'm just flattered that she wants to use Back 40 to publish some of this stuff. She has been getting more and more recognition across the country. She just really likes what we're trying to do locally here. I think that's the big attraction.
Say, come in here, boy. Do you have any reading material?
Well, how are you doing?
Oh, I couldn't be better.
Hot off the press, We Live or Die in Pixley. Yeah.
Well, just sit down over there and let me see
Check
what
this out.
what the cover looks like.
I think it turned out pretty good.
Uh-huh. I thought these commercials were so fascinating. I cut them all out and made this collage. A quick lube job, Jim, say $5.
I like this one. Five tuxes, get one groom free.
This is too much. There will be no room at the end here. This is what happens when you visit a celebrity. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Wilma.
When I hit 80 years old, I thought, what is 80? And nobody ever told me what it is. I still don't know.
Happy birthday.
Magic 17 and new in California, working in bursting sweet vineyards, hot sand on sole, one strap held by a safety pin. A girl could be whatever she desired, the first breath of Eve in paradise, the last gasp of Jean Harlow in Hollywood. I was heartbroken when I heard it. She was only 26 years old. I would have daydreams or illusions or something, and one of them was I wondered if I could fit into Jean Harlow's clothes, even if Mama would allow it, which I knew she wouldn't.
So is that 17-year-old girl you?
Oh, of course. I was picking grapes in my uncle's vineyard, you bet. There's nothing in here that's fake or false. You would not believe the people who have published my writing. I have to say that I have been in some other than your ladies' home journals. I've never approached them either, because I knew pretty well what the answer would be. Oh, good lady with purple hair, pouring tea from a silver pot, you have figured me all wrong from the moment someone said that fatal word poet. You tell me that writing poetry must be a nice little hobby that one can take up and put down whenever one feels like it. Fine lady in good social standing, wearing a strand of pearls, please give me another eclair to close my angry mouth before I say there is no place where a poet can put it down, kiss it off, and just walk away.
To suddenly encounter a writer who was writing from a different level of experience, with the same verve and the same originality and the same craft, but who was not dependent upon allusions to other poetry, for example, or to the resonance of the classics. Rather, she was dependent on the resonance of Kmart.
My Kmart bench companion, fresh-faced and jello-fat, she wore a yellow jersey dress and hugged a bag of popcorn to her bosom as she would a baby, smiled at me when I sat down beside her, started talking. My doctor would throw a hissy if he saw me eating all this salt and butter. Funny thing is, I could pass on by the popcorn machine if I didn't have to smell the stuff.
What I think Wilma McDaniel does is that she reminds us that we might be on that bench at Kmart, or some part of us is on that bench at Kmart. And we may have, in some fashion or another, without thinking about it, separated ourselves from that. Those people, we might say. Well, you know, those people in the valley, those homeless people. Wilma reminds us that that's us. Bakersfield theology. siren blasts, and one fire engine streaks past the city park where two old men sit on a bench eating Big Macs on Easter Sunday and talking about the resurrection. You never will know for sure in this here world, but you've got a feeling deep down inside of you that somewhere, someone is going to raise you up someday.
My work is, as one man said, so flagrantly biblical, and you're right about fundamentalist people, you know, the ministers, and so much about the culture. How do you know this? I was raised in a Protestant fundamentalist home, but I tended to find my own way, and I entered the Catholic Church at 21 after 3 years of study.
Kneel at the cross, Christ will meet you there. Come while he waits for you. Listen to his voice, leave with him your care, and begin life anew. Kneel at the cross, leave every care. Kneel at the cross, Jesus will meet you there.
If I'd been free to do so, which would have been in a different life, of course, I would have chosen to be a Carmelite nun, to be enclosed and to be in a house of contemplation. And I've spoken about this to God at times, and he gave me something much harder. I had great responsibilities with my family. My mother, her health was so precarious at times, she would require bedfast care for a year at a time. We have to sometimes just hold on, endure. Good Friday, April 17th, 1987. The refrigerator chugs in this overpriced apartment where nothing works full-time but God, and I am too sick with the flu for piety, walking the 14 stations of the cross as planned for months. Instead, I drink 7-Up in a glass of ice cubes and read of mystics who lived harder lives than mine, but had more grace, I tell myself, and several such small lies, and wobble to the sink for lemons. Window open will cool the fever. A breeze stirs the wrinkled grayish drapes, the folds in the garment of a poor woman at the crucifixion. One much like myself had I been there. The picture was taken at a very, very important time of my life. I was struggling to decide whether to submit my work. My decision turned out to be one of the wisest I've ever made. It affected my life so radically, even to this very moment. After my work appeared in several magazines, I was no longer the private person I was, and it was for the best, because I was intensely private. At a certain point, it was good that I abandoned that life.
What I discovered about Wilma after I knew her a few years is that many, many of her friends that she has known for years, like Mary Tall-Mountain, the Native American poet, I thought they, had been together on so many occasions, and they had never met. Mary died a few years ago, and that's when I found out they had never met. She said, I sure would like to have met Mary. 25 years they corresponded, sent each other poems. She hasn't met Simon.
In person. I've written to her and she's written to me and we've talked on the telephone. But it doesn't matter. It's as if through her stories and through her poems, as if I know her.
He doesn't come to me on Sundays in his good suit and black string tie, piously carrying a Bible. Never. But place me in a Saturday town of khaki men with southwest faces and rich, slow tongues, and Papa will blow around the corner on a Prince Albert wind, carrying a little poke of candy, maybe jelly beans. He will spot me with no trouble, smile confidently and say, "Sister, you want to go eat a bowl of chili at Poor Boy's Cafe?" I will get up from the bench in front of J.C. Penney's and go to meet him as I always do.
Part of the things that went on with the children of Dust Bowl migrants when the parents were saying, "Oh my Lord, look at them young'uns clutch and hug dancing." They had the immigrant's dilemma. They wanted them in California. They wanted what California had to offer, but they didn't want the children to change. That's the old country, new country. You want to keep the best of the old country, and in some cases you try to create a way to limit what children will do, but they become Californians.
Would you grace us with another poem?
Boys, you have to keep that low. Let me read Buried Treasure while I've got my breath.
Great.
Buried Treasure. L.B. Hayes ruined his expensive shoes, squashing around the autumn desolation of a sharecrop farm in Caddo County. Okie boy turned 50, searching for anything that had belonged to his father when he was fighting the Great Depression, kicked at a lump behind the caved-in cellar,
and discovered a rusty Prince Albert tobacco can, stowed it away as he would a saint's bones in his Lincoln Continental, and headed back to Bakersfield. Albie Hayes was making the immigrant's journey. He's been to the new country. He's got to go back to the old country to find out who he is. It's a journey of self-discovery, and indeed, like a saint's bones, you take something physical with you to remind you of what everybody else was and who you are, because you can only be part of the continuum.
Dirty Stetson, khaki clothes, cane beside him on a Kmart bench. I heard the old man say, "You know, if us men don't have to look no certain way like woman does, or men expect her to look. You take Buck Owens. Well, he looks just right. Put that face on a woman, they'd run her out of town."
People love to hear that, women as well as men, you know.
Did you ever meet Dorothy, Buck's sister?
Did she look like him?
No. Thank God for Dorothy.
People feel they know individuals because of a shared past. So Buck Owens is never Buck, he's old Buck. He's old Buck. He's our Buck. That's what that means. And these may be people who never had the privilege of seeing him perform when he was younger, but he's still old Buck because they know that deep inside, Buck is real, folks. They could never say that about Frank Sinatra. Old Frank didn't fly. There's something about the society in which the shared background creates a nudge more familiarity no matter what.
I'm hoping that these boys will honor me with one last song, and that's Corrina, Corrina. And my mother thought this was not a proper song, and I never did know why. But anyway, I would love to hear it.
Corrina, Corrina, where you been so long? Corrina, Corrina, where you been so long? I ain't got no loving since Corrina's been gone. Ben Hahn on the guitar. Corina, tell the world I do. Well, I love Corina, tell the world I do. Makes my heart beat stronger, cause the love's so true. Everybody! Corina, Corina, where you been so long? Corina, Corina, where you been so long? I ain't got no loving since Corina's been gone. Turn it around. I ain't got no loving since Corina's been gone.
By the time I was 10, I was afflicted with poetry. Not only affected, I was afflicted. It had me. I was in its grips, and I remain there today. Now that's all you need to know about one aging poet, isn't it? Oh dear.
My drifting memory goes back to the spring of '43, when I was just a child in Mama's arms. My daddy plowed the ground and prayed someday he could leave this rundown mortgaged Oklahoma farm. Then one night I heard my daddy saying to my mama that he'd finally saved enough to go. California was his dream, a paradise, for he had seen pictures in magazines that told him so. California cotton fields, where labor camps were filled with worried men with broken dreams. California cotton fields, as close to wealth as Daddy ever came.